The world didn't end in fire or war. It ended with a single bite. It started with whispers, strange attacks, people vanishing, hospitals filling up with patients suffering from an unknown illness. Then, those whispers turned into screams. Within days, cities collapsed. Within weeks, the entire world was overrun. Ethan Carter had seen it happen firsthand. He had been at work when the first wave of the outbreak hit New York City. As a firefighter, his job was to save people. But when the infected came, there was no saving anyone. The fire station was overrun, his colleagues torn apart, and the city turned into a graveyard of walking corpses. Now, months later, he sat in a dimly lit underground shelter, gripping a rusted crowbar, one of the few weapons he had left. Across from him, Dr. Rachel Myers stared at a half-broken laptop, its screen flickering with unreadable data. The others, Marcus, Lena, and a handful of others, were silent. "We can't stay here much longer," Marcus finally said. His voice was deep, hardened from years of military service. "The food's almost gone, and those things are getting smarter. We have to move." "Move where?" Lena snapped. "There's no place left." Rachel adjusted her glasses. "There's a military research facility about 20 miles from here. I worked there before everything. If I can get access to their data, I might be able to find something useful. Maybe even a cure." Ethan exhaled. He wanted to believe her. He really did. But he had seen what this virus did. "There is no cure," he muttered. Rachel's face darkened. "Then what's your plan? Hide underground forever?" "We have to try something, or we're already dead." Before anyone could respond, a low, guttural moan echoed through the shelter. The sound sent ice through Ethan's veins. Marcus grabbed his rifle. "They found us." The moans multiplied, turning into an eerie chorus. Then came the pounding. The dead were at their door. Ethan shot to his feet. "We need to move. Now." Chaos erupted. The group scrambled for weapons, bags, anything they could carry. The shelter's metal door groaned as the weight of the undead pressed against it. A loud bang. Then another. The door wouldn't hold much longer. Marcus yanked open a rusted vent. "This leads to the sewer tunnels. It's our only way out." Lena hesitated. "Sewers? You think they aren't down there too?" Ethan met her eyes. "Would you rather stay here?" She cursed under her breath and jumped into the vent. One by one, they followed. As Ethan climbed in last, the shelter's door finally gave way. A flood of rotting corpses stumbled inside, their dead eyes locking onto him. He didn't look back. He pulled the vent shut behind him and plunged into the darkness. Their fight for survival had just begun. The air in the sewer was thick with the stench of decay. The survivors moved cautiously through the darkness, their footsteps echoing in the tunnel. Ethan led the way, gripping his crowbar tightly, every nerve in his body on high alert. Behind him, Lena clutched a pistol she had taken from the shelter, her knuckles white. Marcus carried his rifle, scanning the tunnel with practiced precision, while Rachel tried to keep up, her breathing ragged from the stress of their narrow escape. "We need to find a way up," Marcus muttered. "Staying down here is suicide." "No argument there," Ethan whispered back. The tunnels were damp, the walls covered in grime. Water dripped from the ceiling, creating eerie echoes. The deeper they went, the stronger the smell of rot became. Then, they heard it. A low, guttural growl. The group froze. The sound wasn't coming from behind them, but ahead. Ethan raised his hand, signaling everyone to stop. He narrowed his eyes, straining to see through the darkness. Then, a silhouette emerged from the shadows. A zombie. Its skin was pale and rotting, its mouth stained with old blood. It turned its head at the sound of their breathing, letting out a sickening snarl. "Don't shoot," Ethan hissed. "It'll draw more." Lena pulled a knife from her belt and nodded. Silent. Deadly. She crept forward, her movements smooth and practiced. In one swift motion, she plunged the blade into the creature's skull. It let out a soft groan before collapsing onto the wet floor. "Good job," Marcus muttered. Lena wiped the blood off her blade. "Let's keep moving." They continued through the tunnel, the tension thick. Every shadow, every noise, every breath felt like a potential threat. Then, they found the ladder. Ethan climbed up first, pushing open the manhole cover just enough to peek outside. What he saw made his stomach tighten. The city was in ruins. Buildings burned in the distance, smoke rising into the night sky. The streets were filled with wrecked cars, abandoned belongings, and bodies, both the truly dead and the ones that still moved. He scanned the area. No immediate threats. He climbed out, helping the others up one by one. Rachel shielded her eyes from the smoke. "We need a plan." "We head to the research facility," Marcus said. "It's our best shot." "It's 20 miles away," Lena argued. "We don't have a car. Walking through this city is suicide." Ethan glanced around. "Then we find transportation." As they moved cautiously through the wreckage, they saw what had once been a police station up ahead. A few wrecked patrol cars sat outside. "That's our best bet," Marcus said. "If any of those cars work, we can be out of here in minutes." They approached slowly, checking every shadow. The entrance was busted open, doors hanging off their hinges. Blood was smeared across the walls. Ethan stepped inside first, his crowbar raised. The inside of the station was a nightmare, desks overturned, bullet casings scattered across the floor, and bodies slumped in chairs, their faces twisted in agony. Then, a noise. A rustling sound. Rachel gasped as a figure moved from behind a desk. But it wasn't a zombie. It was a man. He was thin, his clothes torn and dirty. He raised a pistol, his hands shaking. "Don't come any closer." "Whoa, easy," Ethan said, raising his hands. "We're not here to hurt you." The man's eyes were wild with fear. "You're just like the others. You'll take what you want and leave me to die." Lena stepped forward. "We're just looking for a car. That's it." The man hesitated, his grip on the gun tightening. Then, he exhaled sharply. "Keys are in the locker room. Some of the officers tried to get out before they turned." Marcus glanced at Ethan. "Worth checking." Ethan nodded. "Watch him." He and Lena made their way down the hall. The further they went, the worse the smell became. When they reached the locker room, they found what they were looking for. A set of car keys, still hanging in an open locker. Lena grabbed them. "Let's go." But as they turned to leave, a loud crash echoed through the hallway. Then, a scream. Ethan and Lena rushed back, their weapons raised. The man was dead, his throat ripped open. And standing over him was a new kind of zombie. It wasn't like the others. It was fast. It turned its head toward them, eyes burning with hunger. Then, it charged. Ethan barely had time to react before the creature lunged, its jaws snapping inches from his face. Ethan barely had time to react before the creature lunged at him. Its movements were unnaturally fast, its rotting limbs propelled by something far more sinister than the slow, shambling undead they were used to. He threw himself to the side as the zombie's jaws snapped inches from his throat. Lena didn't hesitate, she raised her pistol and fired. The shot rang out in the station, the bullet tearing through the creature's skull. It collapsed instantly, its body twitching before going still. Ethan pushed himself up, breathing hard. What the hell was that? Lena nudged the corpse with her boot, her face pale. It moved too fast, like it wasn't fully gone yet. Marcus and Rachel rushed in, weapons raised. What happened? Marcus demanded. Ethan gestured to the body. Something's wrong. These things, they're changing. Rachel crouched down, examining the corpse. The infection is evolving. If some of them are faster, stronger, we're running out of time. Lena shook her head. We don't have time for this. We have the keys. Let's get the hell out of here. Ethan didn't argue. The gunshot had likely attracted attention, both the undead and the living kind. They ran toward the garage, where a police SUV sat in the corner. Marcus tried the key. The engine roared to life. Relief washed over the group as they climbed in. Ethan took the passenger seat, gripping his crowbar tightly as Marcus gunned the engine and sped out onto the ruined streets. But their troubles were far from over. They made it only 5 blocks before they saw the roadblock. A makeshift barricade of cars and debris blocked the street, and beyond it, a group of armed survivors stood, weapons drawn. Shit, Marcus muttered. Lena tightened her grip on her pistol. I don't like this. One of the men, a burly figure with a shotgun slung over his shoulder, stepped forward. He raised his hand in a signal to stop. Marcus slowed the SUV but didn't stop completely. Be ready, he whispered. Ethan rolled down the window slightly. We don't want trouble. The man grinned. That's good, 'cause trouble's the last thing you need right now. He tapped the side of the SUV with the barrel of his gun. Nice ride. You got supplies in there? Ethan's stomach sank. Raiders. He could see it in their eyes. They weren't offering help. They were scavengers, preying on the weak. Rachel whispered, we need to get out of here. The man noticed and chuckled. Now, don't be rude. We don't take much. Just your weapons. Your food. Your gas. Maybe one of you stays behind as payment. His grin widened. The girl looks like a fighter. Lena raised her pistol. Come and try. Everything happened at once. Marcus slammed his foot on the gas, the SUV lurching forward. The raiders opened fire, bullets slamming into the vehicle. Hang on. Marcus shouted. The SUV crashed through the barricade, metal screeching as debris flew. One of the raiders tried to jump out of the way, but the front bumper caught him, sending him sprawling. Gunfire erupted behind them as the SUV tore down the road. Rachel ducked as a bullet shattered the rear window. We're not gonna make it. Ethan grabbed his rifle and turned, firing out the window. One of the raiders dropped. The others scrambled to chase after them, but the SUV was too fast. Finally, the gunfire faded. Silence. Marcus didn't slow down until they were miles away. He pulled onto a side road, finally stopping in an abandoned parking lot. For a long moment, no one spoke. Lena finally exhaled. That was too close. Rachel wiped sweat from her brow. We just made enemies. Ethan rubbed his forehead. They were never going to let us leave alive. Marcus nodded. We keep moving. No stopping until we reach the facility. No one argued. As the sun began to set, they drove into the unknown, knowing that both the dead and the living were hunting them. The SUV rumbled down the cracked highway, weaving through abandoned vehicles and scorched wreckage. The world around them was a graveyard, the remnants of civilization lost to the undead. Smoke still curled from distant fires, and the occasional silhouette of a wandering zombie could be seen in the fading daylight. Ethan sat in the passenger seat, gripping his crowbar. The near-death encounter with the raiders had shaken them all, but he knew they couldn't afford to dwell on it. They had a destination, the military research facility, and it was their best shot at finding answers. Rachel stared at the road ahead. "We should be getting close," she murmured. "Another 10 miles, maybe less." Marcus nodded, keeping his eyes on the road. "Let's hope we're not the only ones thinking of heading there." Lena checked her pistol. "If we are, that means two things. Either there's nothing left, or we just walked into a bigger problem." The silence that followed was heavier than the air itself. They reached the outskirts of the research facility just as the sun disappeared. The massive compound loomed in the distance, surrounded by high concrete walls topped with barbed wire. Watchtowers stood at the corners, their searchlights dark and lifeless. But something was wrong. The front gates were wide open. Ethan's grip tightened. "That's not a good sign." Marcus slowed the SUV, scanning the area. No guards. No gunfire. Just nothing. Rachel swallowed hard. Either they all evacuated, or... A shrill, inhuman screech cut through the night. The group snapped to attention as movement erupted from the shadows. Zombies. Dozens of them. They poured out from the trees, their rotting bodies moving with terrifying speed. Their eyes glowed in the dim moonlight, their snarls filling the air. These weren't the slow, decaying corpses they had seen before. These were the fast ones. "Drive!" Ethan shouted. Marcus didn't need to be told twice. He slammed his foot down, and the SUV lurched forward. The undead chased after them, their speed unnatural. Some leapt onto abandoned cars, others sprinted like animals on all fours. Rachel fired out the window, her bullets taking down 2 of them. "They're too fast." Lena aimed and shot, hitting another in the head. It collapsed, but more replaced it. The SUV skidded as Marcus took a sharp turn into the compound. They crashed through the front gate, metal scraping against metal. And then, they saw the battlefield. The facility's courtyard was littered with bodies, both soldiers and zombies. Blood stained the ground. Bullet casings glinted in the moonlight. The stench of death was overwhelming. And at the center of it all stood a group of survivors. Armed to the teeth, they were using makeshift barricades and mounted machine guns to fight back against the approaching horde. One of them, a rugged-looking man in military gear, spotted the SUV and waved frantically. "Get in here. Now!" Marcus swerved toward them, slamming the brakes just as the survivors opened fire on the incoming zombies. The battle had begun. Gunfire echoed through the compound. The survivors fought with brutal efficiency, mowing down the undead as they poured in through the broken gates. The mounted guns ripped through flesh, but the fast ones kept coming. Ethan jumped out of the SUV, swinging his crowbar at an approaching zombie. He cracked its skull open, sending it collapsing to the ground. Rachel stuck close behind him, reloading her pistol. "This isn't just an outbreak," she gasped. "This is a full-on war." The military man from before grabbed Ethan's shoulder. "You picked a hell of a time to show up," he shouted over the gunfire. Ethan didn't hesitate. "You need more fighters?" The man grinned. "Always." He tossed Ethan a rifle. Ethan caught it. And then, without another word, he joined the fight. For 30 brutal minutes, they fought like cornered animals. The zombies climbed over corpses, their hunger relentless. More and more of them came, their movements faster, more intelligent. But the survivors held their ground. Marcus took position behind cover, picking off zombies with precise headshots. Lena fought like a demon, using both blade and bullet to cut down anything that got too close. Rachel stayed near the barricade, helping reload weapons and treating the wounded. And Ethan. Ethan became a soldier. With every pull of the trigger, he felt something change inside him. Fear turned into focus. Desperation turned into determination. These things had taken everything from them. It was time to start fighting back. Finally, the last shot was fired. Silence. The courtyard was a graveyard once more. Only this time, the survivors were still standing. Ethan lowered his rifle, his breath heavy. He turned to the military man, who was wiping blood off his face. "Name's Captain Reynolds," the man said. "And you just survived the worst night of your life." Ethan glanced at his exhausted team, then at the carnage around them. "No," he said, gripping his rifle. "The war is just beginning." The aftermath of the battle was grim. The smell of blood and gunpowder lingered in the air as the survivors regrouped. The bodies of the undead, some still twitching, were piled high near the barricades, while the wounded were being tended to in whatever sheltered corners they could find. Ethan wiped sweat from his brow, his hands still trembling from the fight. The adrenaline was fading, but the horror of what they had just survived remained. He turned to Captain Reynolds, the grizzled soldier who had led the defense. "You were holding out pretty well before we got here," Ethan said. "What's the situation?" Reynolds gave a humorless chuckle. "You call this holding out?" He gestured to the massacre around them. "We had nearly 40 men a week ago. Now we're down to less than 10. Lena holstered her pistol. "Then why are you still here? Why not retreat?" Reynolds sighed and motioned for them to follow him. "Because of this." He led them through the blood-stained courtyard and into the main building of the facility. Inside, the walls were reinforced with metal plates, and supply crates were stacked high. But more importantly, in the center of the makeshift command room, was a secure vault with a reinforced door. "We were guarding this," Reynolds said, resting his hand on the vault's keypad. "It contains the only known research on this infection." Rachel's eyes widened. "The cure?" Reynolds shook his head. "Not quite. But it's a start. Scientists were working on something, a way to slow the infection, maybe even stop it. They didn't get far before this place fell." Ethan exchanged glances with his team. This was bigger than just their survival. "If we can get this data to the right people," Rachel whispered. Marcus crossed his arms. "And where exactly are the right people?" "The world is gone." Reynolds hesitated. "Not everywhere." He moved to a nearby table, unrolling a map. "There's a military bunker 200 miles west. It's the last safe zone we know of. If we can get this research there, it might give humanity a fighting chance." Lena exhaled. "And let me guess, the hard part is getting out of here alive?" Reynolds smirked. "You catch on quick." The escape plan. The facility was overrun. Every exit was compromised, and the undead lurked just outside the walls. The fast zombies were getting smarter, and with each passing hour, their numbers seemed to grow. "We can't hold out forever," Reynolds admitted. "We need a distraction." Ethan leaned over the map. "What about the armory? There have to be explosives in this place." Reynolds nodded. "There are. But setting them off means someone needs to stay behind to trigger them." Silence. Everyone understood what that meant. Rachel swallowed hard. "That's suicide." Reynolds' men glanced at each other, their faces grim. One of them, a younger soldier with a bandaged arm, took a step forward. "We've already lost too many. If staying behind gives you a chance to escape, I'll do it." Ethan clenched his fists. He hated this. Every choice they made now cost lives. But they had no other option. "All right," he said. "We get to the vehicles, load up the research, and when we're clear, you set off the charges." Reynolds patted the young soldier on the back. "You're a brave man, Carter." Carter just smiled. "Let's make it count." The breakout. The next hour was pure chaos. The survivors moved fast, loading supplies into 2 armored military trucks. Ethan, Lena, Rachel, and Marcus took the first truck, while Reynolds and the rest took the second. The undead were already stirring. Their guttural snarls echoed through the night as they sensed movement inside the compound. Carter stood near the armory, a detonator in hand. He gave them a final nod. "Go," he said. "I'll see you on the other side." Then the doors were flung open. The zombies rushed in, a wave of snapping jaws and clawing hands. Ethan slammed the gas, and the truck shot forward. Reynolds followed close behind, their engines roaring as they tore through the compound. The undead swarmed the empty courtyard, chasing after them. Carter watched them go. Then, he pressed the button. A deafening explosion ripped through the facility. Fire and shrapnel erupted into the sky as the armory detonated, collapsing buildings and setting the entire compound ablaze. The shockwave sent zombies flying, turning the once overrun base into a flaming wasteland. Carter was gone. But the survivors were free. The road ahead. The truck sped down the highway, putting as much distance as possible between them and the burning ruins of the research facility. The world outside was still dark, still dangerous, but for the first time in a long while, they had something more than just survival. They had a mission. Ethan stared at the glowing fire in the rearview mirror. Carter had given them a chance. They wouldn't waste it. Lena reloaded her pistol, her expression hardened. 200 miles to the bunker. Marcus adjusted the steering wheel. "Let's hope we're not the only ones left." Reynolds leaned forward from the back seat. "We just declared war on the undead. And this?" He gestured to the data drive Rachel held. "This is our only weapon." Ethan nodded. "Then let's finish the fight." As the first light of dawn broke over the ruined world, the last survivors of humanity drove toward their final battle. The trucks roared down the highway, speeding toward the bunker, humanity's last hope. The world around them was a wasteland, filled with abandoned cars, collapsed buildings, and roaming undead. Smoke from distant fires painted the horizon a sickly orange, and the air smelled of rot and destruction. Ethan kept his eyes on the road, hands gripping the steering wheel. The weight of what they carried, the research drive, felt heavier than any weapon. They had to make it. There was no other choice. Rachel sat beside him, exhaustion in her eyes but determination in her voice. "We're about 100 miles out. If we push through the night, we'll make it by morning." Marcus, driving the second truck with Reynolds and the remaining survivors, radioed in. "We've got fuel for maybe 60 miles. We'll need to find more." Lena exhaled sharply. "Great. More stopping means more chances to die." Ethan didn't disagree. Then came the first problem. The blockade. Up ahead, a massive pile of wrecked vehicles and makeshift barricades blocked the road. Barbed wire was strung between the cars, and old military sandbags suggested it had once been an evacuation checkpoint. Now, it was deserted. Or so it seemed. Ethan slowed the truck, scanning the area. Something's not right. The moment the words left his mouth, gunfire erupted. Bullets ripped into the side of their truck, shattering the side mirror. Ethan swerved, barely missing a spike strip on the road. "Ambush!" Lena shouted, drawing her pistol. From the wreckage, figures emerged, not zombies, but survivors. They wore scavenged military gear, their faces covered by masks and makeshift armor. Their leader, a tall man with a scarred face, stepped forward with a shotgun in hand. "You're in our territory," he growled. "And that means you pay the toll." Rachel gritted her teeth. "We don't have time for this." Ethan's knuckles whitened on the wheel. "What do you want?" The scarred man smirked. "Your trucks, your weapons, and whatever else you're carrying." Lena scoffed. "Not happening." The bandits raised their guns. "Then you die here." The air tensed. Then came the second problem. The horde arrives. A horrifying screech echoed through the night. The bandits froze. Then they heard it, a deafening, inhuman roar, followed by the pounding of hundreds of footsteps. From the shadows of the ruined city, a horde of zombies emerged, hundreds, if not more. But these weren't just any zombies. They were the mutated ones. Some were faster than before, their limbs twitching unnaturally. Others were larger, their rotting bodies swollen with grotesque muscle. And leading them was something far worse, a massive zombie, nearly 8 feet tall, its skin covered in bone-like armor. It let out a guttural snarl and charged. Panic erupted. The bandits forgot about their hostage situation. They opened fire, bullets tearing into the incoming undead. Ethan saw their opportunity. Move! He slammed the gas, the truck roaring forward. The bandits were too distracted to stop them. Behind them, chaos unfolded. The zombies tore through the ambushers, ripping them apart. The bandits' bullets did little against the armored behemoth, which plowed through them like paper. Marcus' truck followed, barely dodging a bandit who was dragged screaming into the horde. They escaped. But not unscathed. The aftermath. A bullet had pierced the truck's radiator. Steam hissed from under the hood, and within minutes, the engine failed. Ethan cursed, slamming his fist on the wheel. Damn it! They were now stranded 50 miles from the bunker. Reynolds and the others pulled up beside them. "We can't stay here," he said. "That thing is still out there." Marcus kicked a rock. "We can't drive either." "What's the plan?" Lena pointed to the distance. "There. A radio tower." Ethan followed her gaze. A lone tower stood on a hill, still intact. Rachel's eyes lit up. "If it still works, we might be able to contact the bunker." Reynolds nodded. "It's risky, but it's our best shot." Ethan looked at his team. "Then we move. Fast." They grabbed what weapons and supplies they could carry, leaving the trucks behind. The road ahead was dangerous, but the mission hadn't changed. They had to survive. They had to finish this fight. The survivors moved swiftly, sticking to the shadows as they made their way toward the radio tower. The undead had been drawn away by the ambush site's chaos, but they weren't far. The distant howls and guttural snarls echoed through the night, a constant reminder that death was never more than a heartbeat away. Ethan led the group, his rifle gripped tightly. Rachel stayed close, carrying the research drive like it was the most precious thing in the world. Because it was. They reached the tower just before dawn. It stood tall and rusted, an old pre-apocalypse structure that had somehow survived the chaos. But something was wrong. Lena stopped at the base of the hill, squinting up at the tower. The doors open. Ethan felt a chill run down his spine. Someone's here. Or something. A dangerous climb. Slowly, they entered the small control building at the tower's base. It was dark, the air thick with the smell of rotting flesh. A body lay slumped against the wall, a man in a military uniform, his chest torn open. Blood covered the floor, still fresh. Rachel covered her mouth. He was just killed. Reynolds crouched down, inspecting the claw marks on the corpse. Not by a bullet. This was something else. Then they heard it. A low, clicking sound from above. Ethan's grip tightened on his rifle. We're not alone. The survivors moved up the metal stairs, their footsteps careful, barely breathing. The higher they climbed, the more unnatural sounds they heard, scraping, clicking, a low growl that sent chills through their bones. Lena reached the top first. She peeked through the hatch to the radio room and froze. Her voice was barely a whisper. "There's a thing up here. The nightmare on the tower." Inside the radio room stood a creature unlike anything they had seen before. It had once been human, but its body was now twisted, elongated, its jaw unhinged like a snake's. Its fingers had become long, bony claws, and its eyes were gone, replaced by deep, empty sockets. It was feasting on another dead soldier, its grotesque mouth stretching impossibly wide as it consumed flesh in wet, squelching bites. Marcus gagged. The creature twitched, it had heard them. In a blur of motion, it lunged, moving unnaturally fast. Ethan fired first. The bullet hit its shoulder, but instead of stopping, the creature twisted its body unnaturally and kept coming. It slashed at Marcus, its claws slicing through his vest but barely missing flesh. Marcus fell back, kicking the thing away. Lena fired, hitting it in the knee, and for the first time, it staggered. Rachel grabbed a rusted metal pipe and swung with everything she had. The pipe cracked against the creature's head, sending it crashing against the radio equipment. Reynolds aimed his shotgun at its head. "Stay down." Boom! The blast tore through the thing's skull, finally ending it. Panting, Ethan turned to the others. "Everyone okay?" Marcus exhaled. "That was too close." Rachel wiped the blood from her face. "We need to move. Now." The message that changed everything. With the creature dead, they turned to the radio. Rachel flicked the power switch. By some miracle, the old system hummed to life. The survivors exchanged hopeful looks. Ethan grabbed the microphone. "This is Ethan Cole. We are survivors carrying vital research on the infection. Is anyone out there?" Static. Then. "Ethan Cole, we hear you." The voice was calm, controlled. "Who is this?" Ethan asked. A pause. Then. "My name is Colonel Briggs. I am commanding the Haven bunker. You're not the only ones left, Ethan. But you need to hurry. You don't have much time." Rachel's heart pounded. "We're 50 miles out. We lost our trucks." Another pause. Then. "There's a supply outpost 15 miles from your position. If you can reach it, we'll send a retrieval team." Lena clenched her fists. 15 miles through zombie-infested ruins. Fantastic. Briggs' voice turned grave. "There's something else you should know." Ethan exchanged a glance with Reynolds. "What is it?" "We intercepted a signal. The infection is changing. It's evolving. And soon, there won't be anywhere left to run." A heavy silence fell over the room. Rachel gripped the research drive. They had to make it. This wasn't just about survival anymore. This was about stopping the end of everything. Ethan took a deep breath. "We're coming." As the first light of dawn broke over the wasteland, the survivors prepared for their final journey. The survivors didn't waste a second. With the radio tower secured and the message sent, they had a destination, the supply outpost 15 miles away. If they made it, the Haven bunker would send a team to extract them. But 15 miles in a world swarming with the undead might as well have been 100. Ethan scanned the horizon as they descended the tower. The city ruins ahead were silent, but they all knew what lurked in the shadows. Rachel adjusted the research drive strapped to her chest. "We can't afford delays." Lena checked her rifle. "Then let's move before we attract." A horrifying shriek cut through the morning air. Marcus muttered. "Too late." From the far end of the street, dozens of zombies emerged, their lifeless eyes locking onto the group. Behind them, a monstrous figure stepped forward, a massive, armored mutant, the same one that had torn through the bandits the night before. And this time, it wasn't alone. 2 more of the mutated undead flanked it, their grotesque forms twitching with unnatural energy. The survivors had nowhere to run. A fight to the death. Get to cover. Ethan shouted. The survivors scattered, diving behind abandoned cars and rubble. The horde charged, their blood-curdling screams sending a chill down Rachel's spine. Lena fired first, taking down 2 of the faster zombies with headshots. Marcus threw a grenade, the explosion sending undead limbs flying. The armored mutant barely flinched. It let out a deafening roar and charged straight for them. Reynolds aimed his shotgun. We can't kill that thing with bullets. Ethan's mind raced. They needed a distraction, something big. Then he saw it. An old gas tanker, parked near the street's edge. If they could blow it up, they could wipe out half the horde in one blast. Ethan pointed. Rachel, cover me. He sprinted toward the tanker as Rachel and Lena laid down suppressing fire. The armored mutant saw him, and charged. The ground shook under its massive weight. Ethan barely had seconds. He reached the tanker, ripped open the fuel line, and let gasoline spill onto the street. Then he aimed his rifle at the growing puddle of fuel. The mutant lunged. Ethan pulled the trigger. The explosion. The bullet ignited the gasoline, sending flames racing toward the tanker. Then. Boom! The shockwave knocked Ethan off his feet. A massive fireball erupted, engulfing the mutant and half the horde. The sheer force of the explosion collapsed nearby buildings, sending debris raining down. Rachel ran to Ethan. Are you okay? Dazed but alive, he nodded. Let's move. The surviving zombies were scattered and stunned. The group used the chaos to break through, sprinting away before more could arrive. The final stretch. For the next 2 hours, they moved quickly, avoiding the undead and navigating the ruined landscape. By noon, they reached the supply outpost, a fortified checkpoint, once used by the military. It was abandoned. Rachel's stomach sank. This was supposed to be our pickup point. Lena scowled. Did they lie to us? Reynolds adjusted his radio. Briggs, do you copy? We're at the outpost, but it's empty. Static. Then. Look up. The survivors turned their eyes skyward. A black military helicopter was approaching fast, its blades chopping through the air. Marcus exhaled in relief. They came. The helicopter hovered overhead as the side door slid open. A soldier inside waved. Get ready to board. The group rushed forward, but the undead were not far behind. From the ruins, more zombies emerged, drawn by the noise. The ground rumbled as another horde charged, desperate to tear them apart before they could escape. Lena cursed. They're coming. The helicopter descended as a rope ladder was dropped. Go! Ethan shouted. Rachel climbed first, clutching the research drive. Marcus and Lena followed, their hands burning from the speed. Reynolds covered them, his rifle picking off the closest zombies. The horde closed in. Ethan was the last to climb. His boots barely left the ground before the first zombie lunged, snapping its rotting teeth inches from his foot. Then. The helicopter lifted off. The last thing Ethan saw below was the sea of undead, reaching, screaming, forever trapped below. A new beginning. Inside the helicopter, the survivors collapsed, exhausted but alive. Rachel clutched the research drive, her hands trembling. We did it. Ethan looked out at the burning ruins below. It's not over. Briggs' voice came over the radio. Good work. But this was just the beginning. Rachel turned to him. What do you mean? Briggs' tone was grim. We've analyzed new data. The infection is spreading faster than we thought. If we don't act soon, the world is gone. Silence. Then Ethan spoke. Then let's finish this fight. The helicopter soared into the distance, carrying the last hope of humanity toward one final battle.